listening to Sasquatch Syndicate.
911, what are you reporting?
We got someone or something crawling around out here.
Did you see what it was? Was it a person or an animal or?
I can't tell. All I know is that my central light came on and I just happened to glimpse and see this thing running across the yard.
And all the ape believers don't want any of the paranormal believers to say anything because they're all whacked and screwed up and we don't want them. And all the paranormal believers don't want, go to the ape believers saying, well, you're all closed-minded. You're not open to the fact that it does this and it does that.
And I look over my left shoulder and this creature is running through the woods and it's bulldozing the brush down. And I knew, man, this thing is going to get me.
Welcome to Sasquatch Syndicate. I'm your host, Chuck, out in Seattle, Washington, along with Paul in Portland, Oregon. Thanks to everyone for listening and those following us at SasquatchSyndicate.com and on our social media outlets. For those participating in the Sasquatch Syndicate monthly t-shirt giveaway, this month's winner was Rick Stevens from Meridian, Idaho. So Rick, thanks for listening to the show, and please check your Facebook for winner notification. Happy March, everyone. We hope you're getting ready for spring. A few fun facts about March. It's the first month of spring, which begins March 19th through 21st. In the southern hemisphere, March is the same as September in the northern hemisphere. Each year, March and June end on the same day of the week, and it's the time of the year when animals start to wake up from hibernation. So for anybody out there doing some Sasquatch investigations, stay alert for bears. Okay, so we've got a few holidays coming up. We have Read Across America Day. That's Dr. Seuss's birthday. We have St. Patrick's Day. That's going to be fun. Daylight Savings Day, Women's History Month, National Nutrition Month, American Red Cross Month, and Fire Prevention Month. The symbols for March, the birthstone is aquamarine and bloodstone. The flowers for the month are daffodil and violet. And the zodiac signs are Pisces and Aries. The name March comes from the Roman god of war, Mars. And for many years, March was not only the beginning of spring, but it was actually the start of the new year. Britain used March 25th as the beginning of the new year until 1752. Fun fact. So just a few announcements. Just a reminder, we are 6 months away from the International Bigfoot Conference and Film Festival. That's going to be held August 31st through September 2nd in Kennewick, Washington. You can buy your tickets at the internationalbigfootconference.com. Don't miss it. It's going to be a wonderful and fascinating event, and really looking forward to seeing everybody out there in Kennewick. Also, I just wanted to thank everyone who's been out to the store and bought merchandise. It definitely helps support the show. All proceeds go to Sasquatch Syndicate programs and events, specifically this podcast, and of course the events that we attend. So again, just wanted to say thanks, and thanks for your continued patronage. So on to this month's podcast. With us tonight, we're joined by Russ Accord. Russ is the author of the Bitterroot book series, as well as a film producer and the host of the International Bigfoot Conference and Film Festival. For those that have never had the opportunity to meet Russ, he is one of Paul and I's favorite individuals in the community. He's a very kind and gracious host. He runs an amazing event. And again, for anyone that can make it out to the International Bigfoot Conference this Labor Day, please make your way to Washington. You will not be disappointed. So Russ, welcome to Sasquatch Syndicate. Really appreciate you joining this evening. And if you wouldn't mind sharing your background and how you got into Sasquatch or Bigfoot for our listeners.
Well, I grew up in Montana, and as you can kind of imagine, Montana is nothing but mountains and scenery, so it was a really great picturesque landscape in the background to imagine and to be creative. So as I'm growing up in Montana and I'm playing around in the hillside and climbing every mountain that I could get my little feet onto, I started thinking about what would, because I'd already always had an interest in Bigfoot. So I always thought, how would they live out here? What would they need? How would they get by? So like a lot of people that you know, and I know, their first exposure to Bigfoot was, for me, it was in the early 70s when the Patterson-Gimlin film came to the theater in Romney, West Virginia. As a kid, my parents took the whole family to the theater, and I sat in the theater and I watched this thing, and I watched the black and white footage. And I watched the guy talk about, the elongated skull, and it just got my imagination running. So from that early age, I always wondered, what they would be like, and if they were friendly or if they were scary, and it was something I never thought that would be scary. I just thought, wow, that's really interesting. And I never thought as a kid even to be afraid of it.
So Russ, what was it that really inspired your passion to write books about the subject?
It was kind of always in the back of my mind. I wanted to write a story about, maybe an adventure, and use Montana landscape as my backdrop for how I wrote the book and how I kind of brought it in, kind of married the two up together. And my favorite area is in the Bitterroot Mountains. My absolutely favorite mountain on the planet is Kootenai Mountain, which is in the Bitterroot Mountains down by Stevensville, Montana. Now, if you've read Footprints of a Legend, then that would be exactly descriptive of where I wanted my story to take place. And it's kind of fun because people that have grown up in Montana or actually live in the Bitterroot Mountains, they that have read the book, they say, holy crap, I walked the trail. I walk on that trail. I know where those rocks are. I know where that landslide is. I know where the cliffs are. But and there's some old cabins way up in the in the backwoods that were put together and assembled by your old loggers or miners or prospectors. So it was easy to put all that together and use that as what I wanted to write the story with. So it was that kind of started it, and I just let my imagination run wild because there's nobody that has captured a Bigfoot that we can say, Russ, your description of Bigfoot is inaccurate because they look like this or they act like that or their behavior is otherwise. So having something that we don't have a capture, I was able to use my imagination and put them and create them the way I wanted them to be. And they're pretty much fearless, and they're not intimidating as far as they don't pull humans apart and devour them. It's just, but there's a respect and there's a unity and there's a family orientation with it that kind of brings it all, kind of ties it all together for me. And you kind of fall in love with the characters. I don't know if you did, but I did.
Absolutely. Just a highly recommended read. And again, for those that haven't picked up those books, you can do that at sasquatchsyndicate.com under book club. And Russ, I know that the feedback has just been absolutely wonderful for both Footprints of a Legend and Bigfoot and the Tripwire. And I know that many of the folks that wrote in about your writing style had so many positive comments just to talk about, your creative writing techniques, how the detail and how you immerse them into the environment. It was just super captivating. And I'm just curious, did you have any authors you really liked to read growing up? Like, really, who influenced your writing style?
The very first book I ever read, which is right here in my desk right now, it's kind of funny. It's Zane Grey wrote a book called Tappan's Burrow, and it's a big old giant hardback book. But it was a story about a guy who went out in the mountains with a burrow, with an old kind of a donkey looking thing, and survives and has some hardships, and by the end of the book, you realize, oh shoot, Tappan's not going to make it. So, but it was the very first book I ever read as a kid, and it was the only book I ever asked for from my parents. I liked Zane Grey because it was a lot of the cowboy and always the mountain scenes, always the horizon, always that trail, always that undiscovered land, and the discovery of what's over the next hillside. But I also, one of my biggest influences, which you're going to get a kick out of this, was Edgar Rice Burroughs. And there's a whole series of Tarzan series from Edgar Rice Burroughs. And what a very, very descriptive, and when you read his books, you're seeing it happen. His and I always wished that I could bring that kind of imagination to a book and make you feel, see, and capture the texture of what was really going on in his books, because they were amazing books.
Wow, that's fascinating. I love his, adventure and science fiction genres. I mean, he was just absolutely fantastic.
So those were, I would say, Zane Grey, Edgar Rice Burroughs, definitely. There was another cowboy writer, Zane Grey, and Louis L'Amour.
Wow, well, you really captured a lot of the Louis L'Amour writing style. And I remember being a kid in Nebraska, man, my grandpa, he loved reading all the Louis L'Amour novels, all the Sackett stories, all the standalone novels. I mean, just one after another, and got me hooked on a few. And yeah, I could totally see kind of that come through in your work. So really cool. So just curious, is your background in like journalism? Or did you always intend to be an author? I mean, what's your background and what really inspired your passion to write?
See, this was all trial for me, because no. I've never had any schooling on it. In high school, we had creative writing, which I didn't get. I got a good grade because I was just kind of imaginative. But when they start talking about what you have to have in a sentence and what you have to have structure-wise, I openly admit that I'm not an English major and I'm not a writer by a writer's standard. I am just a novelist that just throws it out there, and I want my imagination to just fly across the pages. And I hope the message gets across, but no formal training, no nothing like that. So I kind of flew by the seat of my pants, and my books are self-published. I went through CreateSpace and did my first book, my second book, and I'm going to do my third book, get my third one out there too here pretty soon. But I do have somebody who's interested in them once I get the third one done. But we'll see how that goes. Everybody,
sure. Yeah. Let's see. So Bigfoot and the Tripwire, and I'm not going to give away the plot for the listeners, but certainly, the characters, John Stone, and certainly, we loved how you kind of built the compelling event, not to disclose that kind of moved the character into the wild. But when you created the character, did you stereotype that character into a typecast? In other words, if you had to hire that actor to play John Stone, like who would you cast in that role, and kind of really what did you, when you're thinking about that character and all of its attributes, what was your plan behind him?
That's me. And that's awesome. Built that. I built that on my own. It's all my personality in there. It's how I would react. It's how I would feel. That's why there's so much of that book is first person, and it's thinking what's going through my head and how I would react, and the background of being military, and the phone call to the parents. That's exactly how I talk to my mom and dad. The dad's best friend. That is actually, I called him and said, hey, I want to put your name in this book. I won't use your last name, but I want to call you Jeff. Is that all right? And he signed a little release. He said, oh, heck yeah, please do it. And he read that book, and he said, I felt like he said, you know me better than I thought you did. It was just fun. So everything in that book is based on a military guy who is out in the wild and how he reacts to things and how he survives things. And that's exactly who I am. I'm an ex-military guy, and this is how I behave in my environment, which obviously is the mountains. So if I had to cast somebody, he would have to be exactly like me. Maybe better looking, because it's easy to get better looking, but he'd have to be a better looking version of me. How about that?
Oh, you're being modest. You're a very powerful and attractive man. Hey, Russ, I know that a lot of people aren't aware of your military background. Thank you for your service, but if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about just kind of the time you spent in the military and really what that experience was like.
Not a whole lot. I was just, we'll just keep it cool and calm because you know what? What really irritates me is everybody will say, well, I was this, and this in the military and I was a superhero. I'll just leave it with I served the U.S. Army in a capacity that worked very well for me. It was a lot of activity. It was a lot of boots on the ground. It was a lot of flying in airplanes and rappelling out of helicopters. It was very well suited for me. And I will just say I was a soldier, a dedicated soldier to the U.S. Army, and it was a great honor. And I learned so much about myself and what my capabilities were because the limits are pushed. You know, you'll find that where your limits are, and it's amazing how you draw the line in the sand and say I can't go any further than this, and pretty soon you look and that line is 20 miles behind you because you've just pushed yourself beyond what you could have dreamed.
So we had a question come in from John Jeffries from Chicago, Illinois. He wanted to ask if you set the storyline of Bigfoot and the Tripwire from the stories of the Batutut in Laos and Cambodia of a half man, half ape kind of creature, and did you use those stories or encounters to really pull the characters together?
Okay, so Footprints of a Legend took place. That's the first book. Bigfoot and the Tripwire is a prequel. So what Bigfoot and the Tripwire does is it answers all the questions you had about Footprints of a Legend because it sets the stage for the book you just read. And there's that moment of clarity when you have that, oh, so that's how that got there. And oh my gosh, that's where this came from. And it was kind of fun to do it that way, but I had to backtrack far enough to an environment that I was comfortable with. Now I have my uncle served in Vietnam. I have some buddy of mine that Bill, who served in Vietnam, who's a pretty good friend of mine. He's a pipe fitter in Idaho. Bill Carroll, and he was a first sergeant, and I sat and talked with him at length. I talked to my uncle at length, and I learned all the background noise of what Vietnam was. I had heard stories about maybe they discovered that maybe it was a man, maybe it was an ape, but they couldn't quite put their thumb on it in Vietnam. So I thought, wow, what a great place to start. But I didn't have any of that Bigfoot activity in Vietnam. What I did was I took these gentlemen's testimonies and listened intently of what was it like to stand there, feet on the ground in the dusty soil in Vietnam. What was it like? What was it like standing in the dense jungle? What were your fears? What did you not like? What did you love? What was the chow hall like? What was the military like? What was the sounds within the aircraft? What were the smells and the textures? And I wanted my reader to, when that starts off, the reader should actually feel that piece of, okay, as soon as you start turning the pages, you're caught in this action of, okay, we're moving and there's something going on and this is what I smell and this is what I see, and you build tension and then you get the relief of finally getting out and then you get back into it again. It's just, I want my readers to feel all that. And I'll tell you this, when I wanted to write Bigfoot and the Tripwire and Footprints of a Legend, and the third one, which will be coming out, Bigfoot of the Bitterroot, I want my reader to open those pages and do several things. I want them to feel the sine wave of emotions. I want them to feel, maybe laugh, and maybe feel frustrated, and maybe get angry, and maybe pull a tear out of their eye. I want them to feel that emotion of loss, and that emotion of frustration, and that emotion of unfairness, and you're angry. And maybe I giggle along the way because there's some funny stuff in both the books. And the third one is what's gonna, you talk about watching the fireworks and then you have the grand finale. The third book is the grand finale. And people are pretty, I've had a lot of people say, hey, you need to get that book out so we can have a look at what's going to happen here because we're curious. But that grand finale book is going to be my masterpiece. And I've got all the chapters outlined. I've got information in all the chapters. And I'm not quite complete yet, but I already know every piece of this thing and how it's going to go. And it'll be worth the sit down. It'll be worth the read.
So, Russ, I know a lot of the listeners out there that have ever attempted writing can really appreciate, an author dealing with, writer's cramp or writer's block. Just curious, where do you go to get away and really get in the right headspace to do your writing?
I love that you asked me that. I have an office that I moved into a house about 4 years ago, and I built this office with tongue and groove on the wall behind me and a big giant wooden mantle and things around me that have military and cowboy hats and just that. When I come into my office, I feel like I'm in a log cabin. But as you know, I've got a wife and a 9-year-old daughter now, and they'll still walk up to the door and tap on it. Hey, what you doing? And the only time I can write when I'm here at the house is when they're shopping or they're doing something else, and I know I've got a few hours to myself. The one place I do go is I have a timeshare in Montana, in Cedar Lake at Arrowhead Ranch. And they get kind of, bummed out when I say, hey, I want it's timeshare time and I'm going to bust on out of here. If you girls are coming with me, you can't speak to me the whole week. And I get that look, but if they come with me, they can take the car and be gone all day and then go play and look at whatever they want to. But when I'm in that timeshare, because it's built like a log cabin and everything is real rustic, and I'm looking out over the Bob Marshall Wilderness area, and it's just that perfect setting for me. If I look out any of those windows, it's nothing but pine trees and mountains and snow and just gorgeous scenery. And it just puts me right there. I can feel it. And that's when I can't stop my fingers from flying. And sometimes I'll come home and things that are in my mind, I'll have to open up a quick chapter and make a couple notes. Hey, don't forget this, and this, because these are details that are vital to the point I'm trying to get across. So I'll embed little things throughout the year, but when I get to that timeshare, that's when I think I bet I did well over 300 pages last time I was at the timeshare in over a week. It doesn't sound like much to type out 300 pages, but I'm a slow typer, and that was a victory for me. It was great. It was just a great experience.
That's really cool.
So, Russ, now that you're kind of more immersed in the community, hosting events, conferences, making films, has that added or subtracted anything from the release of Bigfoot and the Bitterroot?
Yes. Actually, I'm not going to lie to you. Because to put on a conference of that magnitude, because you've got speakers, vendors, flights in, flights out, hotels, sponsors, ticket sales, keeping up with the website, keeping up with everything. I did not realize, and everybody's going to roll their eyes and think, right, you thought it would be easy. But I had no idea that doing a conference would be so much involved in it, because I won't do a conference in a library where I hope that 50 people show up. My conference is at a convention center, and it'll seat 5,000 people. So I need to make it work. So there's a lot that goes into it. So that's taken me out from in front of the keyboards for a bit to get this conference put on. But the good news is, week number 12, I have a timeshare for week 10. I don't have 11, but I have a timeshare for week 12. Now I have a friend of mine that's using week 10. Week 12, is my timeshare. So that's when I'm breaking it open, and I shut off my cell phone. I get away from people, and I say, don't call me, don't knock on my door, just leave me alone. Nobody knows I'm there anyway. But that's my selfish time. That's for me. So I assure you I'll get some work done on it this year.
So now that you're around more of the community, more of the stories, more of the encounters, more of the purported experts on the subject of Sasquatch or Bigfoot, has that influenced your writing at all? And has it impacted any of the storylines or anything, in terms of your upcoming work on Bigfoot and the Bitterroot?
No, I won't let it. And I'm sure you'll understand this. You're a pretty smart guy, but since the day I started writing books, I will not read books. People will hand me something and say, "Hey, I did this novel. Have a, read it." And I tell them I will when I get done with my third book. So I hear stories all the time from people who have the sightings. I've had stories from researchers, and I'm working on some documentaries. I did a documentary on Babapalooza. I've just finished up. I'm still doing the editing process. I'm making a movie. I've got my hands in so much of this stuff where I'm just busy doing Bigfoot related things, but it has absolutely nothing to do with my story, and I will not let it affect it. And I hear some stories of things that have happened in the woods with Bigfoot, where people have said this happened and I heard this. And if it already wasn't in the layout of the chapters, it does not belong there. It doesn't go there, because I can't take new information and take my old untarnished. I think that's a pure idea, what I had with those first three books. So I can't let anything influence. And that's why I won't read any books. Because if I picked up an Edgar Rice Burroughs book or Louis L'Amour or Zane Grey, I assure you that it would come across, some of that would come across on the pages of my own book. And I don't want somebody to say, "Hey, you write just like Louis L'Amour, or you write just like so-and-so." So once I'm done with that third book, then I'll start reading again. And then I will start, I do have a future of doing I'm going to do because that's Bigfoot, it's a Bitterroot series at the Bitterroot Mountains of Montana. And once I get done with that and take a little bit of a break from it, I am going to do a Yukon series. So it's just going to be nothing bigger, badder, beefier, and insane.
Well, I know we and our listeners are certainly looking forward to, of course, this grand finale. It's going to be fantastic. No pressure. I guess, in terms of just, you've currently released, I believe, most of your books on Amazon in either paperback or electronic version. Just curious, is that your plan for the future? And where could people pick up your book and anything you want to promote?
I have a webpage, russellvictoraccord.com. And there's also internationalbigfootconference.com, where there's a link to that as well. But if you look up my name, Russell Accord, on Amazon, or by the title of either one of those books, you can pick it up on Amazon or Kindle, and they'll get it shipped directly to you. And they're affordable. I didn't go crazy, but I think I will do the third book in paperback as well, and just kind of run it the same way. But I will also add something to it. I'm going to take all three books and do a hard copy of all three books and do a set, and find a way to sell them as a set. And I'll probably, it sounds silly to do it this way, but that's very personal to me. So when I start doing the sets of books where all three books are in the same set and they are hardback, all three of them will be signed. Because when you get them from Amazon or Kindle, they don't get signed. But people that are interested enough to buy the set of three that are going to be hardback, all three will be signed, and that's the only way that I'll actually let those go. And that's just my own personal silliness. But since I'm doing Create Space, I get to do it my way, which is kind of fun.
And I know on your website you do have a kind of a signings calendar, and I know I've seen you, very gracious to sign folks' books as they come up to you at conferences and whatnot. But is there anything coming up that you may be around for those that might be interested in book signings?
The one thing I can guarantee you is I always have my books at the International Bigfoot Conference in Kennewick, Washington over Labor Day weekend. I'll always have my books there. So that'll be one of those kind of a guaranteed that I'll be doing. But since I haven't really put anything on my calendar as far as this year for going and doing any book signings, because realistically, I work full-time on a nuclear site as a safety engineer. So I do have a full-time job. I also work with Babapalooza as his manager, so I get him to his, I book all of his events for him and take him all over for the conferences that he wants to go to. And then I'm also doing two movies at the same time. I'm finishing up the Adam Davis documentary, which is taking a tremendous amount of time because I'm doing all the editing, which is something that's that I'm being taught to do, and I have some really incredible oversight so that I don't make a mistake. This has to be perfection. It has to be my best piece of work. And then we're finishing up on a film with the Bob Gimlin Patterson 1967 technical piece. And it's just been, there's so many irons in the fire right now. And then plus I'm putting a conference on and getting that prepared. So you try to juggle all of that.
Yeah, sounds like you've got a full plate there. So let's talk about the two films you're doing for Bob Gimlin, and maybe it's a little bit too early or too premature. So if it is, that's okay. I was just curious if you could provide some kind of clarity on what you're working on. I know you had some things going on at the Nebraska Bigfoot Conference, and then of course, some upcoming film releases as well. But can you talk about the release schedule and what you're working on, if that's okay?
No. This is good. On the first film I did on Bob Gimlin, I grabbed a camcorder and I thought I took 4 months off of work. Okay, so people act like they don't understand what all went into doing Bob Gimlin's film. But I took 4 months off of work. I hung out with him. I drove him around. We talked a lot. But I'd thrown the camera in front of him and have him just tell me more of his life. And everything got out of order because he's been on rodeo. He spent time with Evel Knievel. He was in the Navy. There's so many things. And I had hours and hours and hours of Bob Gimlin's interview. So I had to pick through it and pick the pieces that kind of I could remember that were in a certain order. And we put together a 2-hour movie. And it's a documentary of Bob Gimlin Beyond the Bigfoot. And that's bobgimlin.com or .com or .net. He has his own webpage. You can look at it that way. But there's a film of Bob Gimlin, and it's 2 hours where he talks about his life. And you're talking, it's not all the Bigfoot piece. There's about 8 minutes of Bigfoot. The rest of it is this incredible cowboy who spent a year, or 2 years, I believe 2 years in a hospital bed after a car accident that should have died. There's so many times in his life that he should have just been taken out, but he's just the toughest old cowboy, and he just keeps going. So that first documentary is for sale now. You can get that all over the place, but the one that we're working on right now is the piece I left out of the Beyond Bigfoot, and it is the Bigfoot piece. It's about what he saw that day, and it's about the technical pieces of the daylight and the time and the footprint, and trying to validate that, his foot, when he jumped off of a stump, to see if he can make an indent as deep as Patty put in the ground. It's breaking down the film and the location from where you shot it to where it was going, and the layout of the land and the rain that came down, and getting it to Yakima and putting it to film, and then what happened throughout all that whole event. So it's very, very technical. It breaks it down. It talks about all those little tiny things. And long story short, it should just be the end all of the 67 film questions, because it's all there. It is different. We can't go back to 1967 and follow behind them on horses with cameras. So we have to. A lot of it is artwork and three-dimensional AutoCAD type things. It's very, very interesting, but it's about the technical pieces and about the details of the thing. So that will be coming out. Once we've shown it to our audience, then we'll be able to take it from there and see where we're going to go with it, because we're going to actually pitch it to the networks.
So while I have you, and finally, can we just talk about the International Bigfoot Conference? We're only 6 months away. It's going to be held Labor Day weekend. Finally, since I have you, can you share a little bit about the International Bigfoot Conference, your VIP dinner, what's going to be different this year, how folks are going to pick up those tickets, and really what the VIP experience is all about?
Okay, so the International Bigfoot Conference is held over Labor Day weekend in Kennewick, Washington. It's August 31st to September 2nd. So we have different ways to get in through the door. One of them is just your general admission. It's $45. You can come in for all 3 days. Starts Friday afternoon, about 3 o'clock. So it's Friday afternoon till later on in the evening, all day Saturday, and then Sunday morning till about 1 or 2. So you have time through that long Labor Day weekend to get in, have your fun, and get out because most people have Monday off. So you have your recovery day if you need to. It's going to have a lot of movies. We'll have Seth Breedlove there, Stacey Brown Jr. there. We have Bill and Amy Lancaster showing their cultured Bigfoot. We have something that I'll be showing of our own here too, which we just haven't quite decided which one we're going to show you. But there's another way to get through the door, which is called the VIP ticket. That gives you all 3 days, same as a general admission, except you get to choose which night. Either you only get one, but you can either pick Friday night or Saturday night, and you buy that. It's a Friday night VIP or a Saturday night VIP ticket, but it still gets you all 3 days, in which you get to go in and have dinner in the same room with all the speakers. And what I do is I divide all the tables up, and one speaker sits at each table. So we have a very limited amount of seats available for the VIP tickets. And what we'll do during that VIP dinner is we're going to show a little film during VIP dinner, which isn't something you have to pay attention to and listen to what's being said because it's mostly going to be music. We're having an event strictly for Bob Gimlin this year in July. It's called the Babapalooza, and he's gathering of about 100 friends and Bob, and it's going to be nothing but camping in the mountains in the hills with bonfires and food and trees and happy times and everything else. So it's just going to be Bob in action. And it's about an hour-long film when we get all done with it. We're going to edit it down to about an hour-long film so that people can just talk and BS and watch this film because this is a tribute to Bob. His film was over 50 years ago and has, stood up against evidence and people trying to pick it apart. So this is because Bob is a wonderful man. He's a great friend, and he's also one of the co-hosts of the International Bigfoot Conference. So those nights, we're going to play the same film Friday night and Saturday night, and you'll get to eat dinner with one of the speakers. So the VIP thing is just a blast. If you can't do the VIP night and you can just get for those 3 days, trust me, you'll still get to meet and shake hands with all the speakers because they'll all have vendor tables, and you'll be able to see all the shows that we're going to show. You have access to all of that. So I would encourage anybody to come and see it, and it's not because it's my conference, because it's not my conference. The conference belongs to the people that come there. All I've done was just facilitate getting the speakers there and the movies there. And it's for you guys. It's for people who want to that want to meet Bob Gimlin or want to meet Seth Breedlove or Ken Gearhart or Lyle Blackburn or Chuck.
Right.
Come on, who would want to meet you?
Right. That's too fun.
What was I thinking?
And there you have it.
All right. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Again, thanks, Russ, for coming on Sasquatch Syndicate. We really do appreciate it. I know our listeners do as well. Thank you for your service. And again, please stay safe. And thanks again for being such a wonderful and gracious host. And for all those out there that can make Russ's event, again, it's the internationalbigfootconference.com. It'll be held in Kennewick, Washington, August 31st through September 2nd.
Excellent. Thank you very much for having me.
This concludes our March 2018 podcast. Sasquatch Syndicate will return on Sunday, April 1st. Thanks to all our listeners and those who've been out to our website and those who have joined us on social media. Sasquatch is a controversial subject, so for all the believers and disbelievers and those who will tell you they have all the answers, just remember, we're flying through space at 700 miles per hour. Buckle up.